All right, thanks for joining us this morning. I'm going to introduce Gloria Allred in a moment, who's going to give you a little background on the bill, the genesis of the bill. Let me just simply say that we expect this bill to get out of the state Senate, off the Senate floor and into the Assembly within the next couple of weeks. And I can tell you that there's clearly a loophole here for victims, particularly minors, who have no recourse when it comes to folks who not only intend to harass them, but I think in many cases hurt them, their reputations, and hurt everything in terms of what shouldn't happen when you kind of come out of a very tough trial. And I want to thank Appellants particularly for being here in Sacramento. I'd like Autumn to say a couple of words, if that would be possible, and I'm going to turn it over to Gloria.
Okay.
Can she say something? Absolutely. We'll just rewind the whole thing.
You can say the same thing.
Yeah.
When I think about what I've been through, I feel it's ironic. I went around thinking, finally, the nightmare is over. And in reality, it was just the beginning. All throughout high school, I'd managed to leave this horrid memory in the dark, because how many teenagers really want to tell their fellow classmates such a thing? None. It's embarrassing and heartbreaking. The day I saw the page on Facebook, my heart dropped. I began to be questioned about my personal business by people I barely even knew. The text message the investigators forwarded ended up being sent to me. I had no idea what to tell my friends and acquaintances when they asked what the investigators were talking about. My privacy was invaded, and I was starting to crumble. I had really just wanted it to be over with, but after I met Miss Allred, I decided that I will not be intimidated to keeping quiet. I will continue to fight so no other victim will have to be put through what I had to suffer, and so that no one will get away with this again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, today we address the important issue of how to stop the harassment of child crime victims after the perpetrators of the crimes against them are convicted and sentenced for those crimes. And there seems to be a glaring loophole in the law where crime victims do not, and especially child crime victims, do not receive the protection that they should have right to enjoy under the law. We're here because last year Anand John, who is a celebrity fashion designer, was convicted in Los Angeles of numerous felonies against young women who were or aspired to be models, as Autumn did. And he was convicted of forcible rape and attempted forcible oral copulation, attempted sexual assault on many of the victims. One of the victims, Autumn, who is now age 18, but she was a minor at the time of the commission of the crimes against her, is here today with Senator Florez and myself. And in reference to Autumn, Mr. John was convicted of 3 felonies, including 2 counts of a lewd and lascivious act with a child under the age of 14 and contributing to the delinquency of a minor. And Autumn testified at Mr. John's trial and spoke at his sentencing and delivered a very emotional victim impact statement. During the trial, her name was not made public because she was a minor, and the court protected her privacy, and she did not do any interviews, and her face was not televised at the sentencing. And therefore, it was very upsetting to her to learn that after the conviction and sentencing of Mr. John, that persons appearing to act on his behalf had contacted a number of her friends on her Facebook page and texted some of them, providing her full name and asserting that she had lied, and that as a result, Anand John had received a life sentence in prison. And I shared with the committee what the text was that was received by her friends, which was, if you're getting this text, you know Autumn Album. Her lies caused Anand John to get a life sentence as a reward of up to $100,000 for the truth. If you have a conscience, please contact Investigator Agaki, and gave his name, his telephone number, and his email address. And so we say the attempt by Anand John's supporters, perhaps agents, to attack her after a jury found him guilty of serious crimes against her was very upsetting to her. And it took a great deal of courage for her to testify both at the grand jury and at the trial, and then again this morning in committee. And it was very embarrassing to her as a teenager to have to testify about the details of what Mr. John had done to her, and many in the courtroom cried as she gave her victim impact statement and discussed the emotional toll that the crimes that he committed against her took on her. So when the sentencing was over, John, Autumn thought, was out of her life. She felt that she'd done the right thing, that she could now go on with her life. But when her friends began to inform her of what John's investigators had posted on Facebook and were texting her friends, she realized that her nightmare was not over. And so she was very upset, especially because some of the friends on Facebook are not actually people she knew, but just were strangers. And she'd never told them she was a victim in a criminal case. Her privacy, which had been protected by the court, had now been completely invaded, and her full name was being disclosed without her consent. In addition, false statements were being made about her. Particularly upsetting to her, the quote that her lies had caused Anand John to get a life sentence, which was completely untrue. The jury believed the truth and as she testified to it, and therefore they convicted Mr. John of crimes against her. And also, he did not get a life sentence because of her testimony. He received it because he was convicted of crimes not only against her, but also against other women. And finally, for the investigator to offer $100,000 for the truth seems like an effort to find someone who was so desperate for money that that person would come forward and say whatever Mr. John's supporters wanted them to say. So she felt that she was being unfairly targeted, unfairly harassed, and she came forward to find out what she could do about it, and that's why I sent a letter to Mr. John's investigators warning them to cease and desist, but received no response. And it was at that point that I spoke to California Senator Dean Florez, who is distinguished majority leader of our state Senate, and asked him if he would introduce new legislation to stop the harassment of child crime victims by defendants or their supporters after the defendants were convicted of crimes against the victim who was a minor. And I felt, and still do, that the present law is inadequate to deal with this problem faced by Autumn, and we discussed changes that I felt needed to be made to provide new protection for crime victims under the age of 18. And we're very appreciative of the fact that Senator Florez immediately responded and took quick action to formulate SB834. So again, we would like to express our deep appreciation to Senator Florez and great respect for his important leadership on this important issue, because it's all about protecting child crime victims, particularly those who've been the victims of sex crimes or lewd and lascivious acts against them, which, by the way, is the main crime that is prosecuted by prosecutors where it comes to a child victim. So we're looking forward to doing everything possible to help this bill become law. I want to say that we know that defendants have many, many rights, and unfortunately, victims, particularly child crime victims, do not have enough rights and protections, and that's what this bill is hoping to accomplish.
Okay. Any questions? You guys good?
And this is Jennifer Lambert over
And
here.
Jennifer, thank you.
Jennifer is Autumn's mother.
Yeah, I
and
just
she's
want to thank you both for doing this. As a mom, and going through all this with her and having her testify and telling her it was finally over and done, you know, and we can move on, and then to have that happen, it was just devastating to have her have to go through something more, you know, once it was supposed to be over. It just continued on. So I appreciate you guys helping trying to prevent that from happening to any other victims, child victims.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, folks.
Do you
Okay.
have any questions?
Any questions?
What are you guys gonna work on in order to make sure that this goes through on the 20th, I believe?
Uh-huh. Well, let me say I'm not sure we're not going to have a vote on this even before the public safety adjourns, and but I do know that by the 20th we will have this bill out, and it will hopefully be on the Senate floor, and we'll be able to get it over to the Assembly rather quickly. And I think this is one of those bills that the governor is going to recognize. There's a huge loophole for victims like Autumn, and I think the goal of it is to make sure that we can move this through as quickly as possible. And it is one of the few bills that we have bipartisan support on in this legislature, so I think it's great. Okay.
And I'll just add that it makes no sense to think that the court can protect child crime victims during the trial and also make orders in reference to the defendant when he or she is on probation, but then to try to argue that the court can't make an order to protect the victim while the defendant is in fact sentenced to prison and in custody. It just defies common sense, and it needs to be remedied so that the victims are protected all the way through the process.
Exactly. Well put. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay.